I'm going to be completely honest with you about something that's been bugging me for months. Everyone's talking about unlimited borrowing capacity and trust structures like they're the absolute holy grail of property investing. And while I'm going to show you exactly why this strategy is massively overhyped for most people, I'm also going to give you the real numbers on what actually makes sense for the average Australian investor. Now, if you're like most people I speak to, you're probably seeing these YouTube videos and podcasts popping up promising that you can buy 10, 15, even up to 20 properties using trust structures. And you're probably sitting there thinking, this all sounds amazing, but is it actually realistic for someone like myself? I'm Chris Moore, I'm a mortgage broker, and I was recently named the Advisor's 2024 New Broker of the Year. I've helped my clients secure well over $200 million in home loans, and here's what I can tell you from being in the trenches. I've got clients with over 7 properties in their portfolio using multiple trust structures, so yeah, it absolutely works. But I've also got the data that shows what most Australians actually do with property investing. So let me break down the 3 key reasons why unlimited borrowing capacity is overhyped, when it actually makes sense, and what the realistic path looks like for most investors. Let me first start off by explaining how unlimited borrowing capacity actually works in theory. First of all, you'll often hear that the quickest way to multiple properties is through trusts. And if the trust is self-sufficient, meaning that the rent covers all of the holding costs for the property, an accountant can simply issue you a letter confirming this for the bank. When this happens, the bank will effectively disregard the debt entirely, as the trust is effectively covering its own expenses and not costing you anything to hold. So in theory, this means that you can continue to repeat the process on and on and on. Property 1 in Trust A, Property 2 in Trust B, Property 3 in Trust C, and so on and so forth. But according to Australian census data, the vast majority of property investors only own 2 or 3 properties. Not 10, not 15, 2 or 3. And when you think about it, it actually makes sense. Owning 10 properties means managing 10 sets of tenants, 10 maintenance schedules, 10 council rates, and 10 insurance policies. For most people, they simply don't want that level of complexity in their lives. And so more and more, I constantly see people rushing into these trust structures because they've been sold the dream of unlimited borrowing capacity. They're paying thousands of dollars in setup costs, often up to $4,000 per trust, plus the ongoing accountant fees, potential land tax implications, all for a strategy that they'll likely never use to its full potential. And the thing that most people don't understand is even when this strategy does work, timing is everything. It only delivers results if it's structured correctly from the very start. For instance, take one of my clients as an example. He owned 4 properties in his personal name, but he wanted to continue to expand his borrowing capacity using this approach. Now, because everything was originally set up in his personal name, he was actually capped out. And after speaking to his accountant, he actually decided that it was going to be best to transfer some of the properties into trust structures. Now, what this actually meant for him was he actually had to pay the stamp duty again and the capital gains tax from moving the properties from his personal name into the trusts. Now, what I should note is he was actually dealing with a different broker before he was referred on to me. In his instance, don't get me wrong, it absolutely made sense. It was a genuine cost of business that was ultimately going to allow him to continue to scale his property portfolio moving forward. But what most people don't realize is that if you've already maxed out your personal borrowing limit, let's say it's $1 million, setting up a trust doesn't change that. You still only have the original $1 million in borrowing capacity. The trust doesn't magically create new money out of thin air. Now, don't get me wrong, trust structures absolutely work when they're used correctly, but you need 3 things for that to be true. Number 1 is you need to be genuinely committed to building a portfolio of 7 to 10 properties and beyond. Not just thinking about it, not just because it sounds cool, but genuinely committed to the lifestyle and complexity that comes with it. Second is you need to have the cash flow to support multiple properties. Remember, each property inside the trust needs to be positively geared or at least break even to make the strategy work effectively. And at the moment, unless you're looking at regional areas with higher rental yields, it's practically very difficult to get a positively geared position based solely on a 3 to 4% yield. Now, the third is that you need to understand this is a long-term strategy. We're talking 10 to 15 years of systematic property acquisition, not an overnight get-rich-quick scheme, purely because it's just the current flavour of the month. For most Australians, though, the more realistic path looks like this. Buy your first home, build some equity over the next 3 to 5 years, then use that equity to buy one investment property. Maybe down the track, you look at buying a second investment property. And you know what? That's actually a fantastic outcome. Two properties, your home, plus one investment can actually set you up beautifully for retirement if you do it correctly. I'll put this into perspective for you. If you buy a $500,000 investment property today and it grows at just 5% per year, which is pretty conservative, in the next 20 years, that property is going to be worth roughly 1.3 million. Add in the rental income, the tax benefits, and you're actually looking at a significant wealth building outcome. The beauty of this approach is its simplicity. You don't need complex trust structures. You don't need to pay thousands in setup fees. You don't need to become a full-time property manager. You just need to be smart about the timing, location, and the financing. So here's what I recommend for most people. First is focus on building equity in your first property. Use a mortgage offset account, make extra loan repayments when you can, and let capital growth do its natural thing. Second is once you've got enough equity, generally after the first sort of 3 to 5 years, that's when you can start seriously looking at your first investment property. The third is work with a mortgage broker who seeks to understand your longer term goals from the start, not just someone trying to sell you the most complex solution possible. And if you do genuinely want to build a large portfolio, then yeah, let's absolutely talk about trust structures, but let's do it properly with proper planning, proper cash flow analysis, and a realistic timeline. Look, I know this video might not have been as exciting as the buy 20 properties and retire rich narrative you see everywhere, but here's what I've learned after helping my clients secure well over 200 million in loans. The people who build real substantial wealth are the ones who focus on a realistic strategy that actually fits their lifestyle and goals. And here's something else you should know. One of the major lenders that's been dominating the trust lending space just pulled out completely. They went from being the go-to option to shutting it down within 48 hours. This is a major shift in how lenders are viewing these structures. And when one major bank changes direction like this, it's often a sign that others might follow. So whether you're considering trust structures or sticking with a simpler approach, getting proper advice matters more now than it ever has before. And if you're thinking about your next property move, whether that's your first investment or you're genuinely looking at scaling up, I'd love to figure out what actually makes sense for your situation. We can look at your goals and figure out the smartest path forward without all the hype and complexity. You can book a time that works for you using the link below. It's a no obligation chat where we'll map out exactly what's realistic for your situation. Otherwise, thanks again. I'll see you in the next one.